If you're anything like me, you love archery, but one thing that sucks about archery is how expensive everything is. Arrows, for example, can be $10 an arrow just for a so-called decent brand. That's ridiculous. And on top of that, if you decide to buy some off of, I don't know, eBay or China somewhere that's cheaper, shops will charge you $1 to $2 just to cut an arrow, which is ridiculous. It takes them less than 5 minutes. They shouldn't charge anything for it. But today we're going to do an experiment and see if we can cut an arrow to a certain length using just a chop saw. The reason I'm using a chop saw is because, well, that's what I had. I don't have any other tools. I don't have a Dremel. I don't have any fancy tools. I'm just going to use a plain old chop saw used for cutting wood, and we're going to see if we can cut these down to a smaller length. Okay, so these are all the things you're going to need to be able to cut your arrows using a chop saw. First thing you're going to need is some masking tape, Sharpie pen, pliers, lighter, of course, a tape measure, and obviously your arrow. So one thing to mention is you will not necessarily need the pliers if your inserts aren't already inside your arrow. If they are, you're going to need the pliers to be able to pull them out. But if they're not, say they're outside in a separate package and you have to install them yourself, you're not going to have to use the pliers to pull the tip out. So let's go ahead and pull the tip out right now. Okay, so all you're going to have to do in order to pull out the insert of your arrow, if it already is installed, is take just a simple lighter, heat up the point until it gets decently hot. That way it softens the glue holding the insert in. Once it gets hot enough, you can just go ahead and pull it out with your pliers. Okay, so it's been about a minute. Let's go ahead and see if the glue is soft enough. Now you're going to want to twist while you pull, and it should come right out. As you see, that came out pretty quick. We hopefully didn't get it too hot. And one thing to keep in mind is this tip is going to be really hot, so you're going to want to set it on something that won't burn. Also, this will ruin the temper of your field points if they are hardened. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we've got the tip out, it's time to wrap some tape around the area you want to cut. This is important for two reasons. One, it gives you a really clear marking spot, and two, it supports the shaft of the arrow so when the blade comes down, it won't split off any splinters at the end. That's why you want to have a pretty long piece so you can give it tons of support. So I'm going to cut my arrows to about 30.5 inches, and these are 32. So right there should be pretty close to where I need to mark. So then I'm just going to go ahead and roll this up nice and tight. That way it gives tons of support to the arrow shaft. Okay, now we're ready to measure it out and mark it. Okay, so I've got my arrow lined up with the measuring tape. You can see I have the tape right in the area that I want to mark it, which is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this at 30.5 inches. And then if you're doing a large batch of these, make sure to cut on the same side of the line each time. That way all the arrows stay the same length. So now that we've got that marked, let's go ahead, take it over the chop saw and try to cut it. Okay, so I've got the arrow on the chop saw, and one thing to remember is you always want to make sure that your chop saw table is at 0 degrees and that the tilt of your chop saw is at 0 degrees. Otherwise, it will for sure not come out as a square cut. So let's go ahead and line up the line. So we're going to cut on the right side of the line, which looks to be right there. And I'm just going to hold the arrow down with my thumb, like you can see on the left. And let's go ahead and give this a try. Seemed to work pretty well. Let's get a close-up. Okay, so this is kind of more of a close-up view. You can see how the tape did its job to make sure no splinters came out. Here, let's show you the one that I took the tape off of. Maybe focus. There we go. You can see no real splinters came off the end, which is good. That's what we wanted. For comparison, I have one that I did not put any tape on, and you can see hopefully right here, maybe, you can see right there that it did splinter off some of the carbon from the arrow. We don't want that because that can weaken the shaft. So that was the whole main point of putting the tape on there, was to give it support when we cut it. But now all we have to do is go ahead and glue our insert back in. Okay, so to glue the insert back in, you can use any type of glue you really want. You can either use super glue, which most people have, or hot glue, which again most people have. I prefer to use hot glue because it's more rubbery, and I've noticed that the inserts fall out less when I've used hot glue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the hot glue, put some on the insert, And then after that, I'm going to heat up the hot glue that is actually on the insert and put it back in the arrow. And then while I'm putting it in there, I'm going to make sure to twist the insert so the glue gets spread around really well. Okay, now it should be all ready to go. There you have it. I was able to cut this arrow down to the length I wanted without any extra cost to me. I already had all the tools I needed. I had the hot glue, the lighter, the chop saw. The goal of this was to give you guys options to cut your arrows without having to drive into town, go to a shop, and pay 12 bucks to have a dozen of arrows cut. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know if you want to see any more archery stuff. I love archery. I love doing that kind of stuff. And yeah, hope you have a good day. Time for a bonus clip. I have an old aluminum arrow and I want to see if the chop saw would work to cut these, because I know chop saws can cut aluminum if you go really slow. So let's go ahead, give this a try. Here goes the aluminum arrow. That totally worked. Cool.